Hey, it's Jordan with TYT and TYT Politics. I'm out here in Alpine, Texas, where we're about halfway through where the Trans-Pecos pipeline, the route into Mexico. It starts a little bit north of here, and right behind us you see construction. You see a little bit of pipe way back there, and I'm here with Coyne Gibson. You're with the Big Bend Conservation Alliance, and you've been on the forefront of this pipeline. This pipeline, as opposed to what I've been covering in North Dakota, it's not just Native Americans bothered by it, or environmentalists, or progressives, but it's kind of people you would normally group in with the oil and gas crowd. More conservative landowners having their land seized by eminent domain. Kind of want to start from the beginning. Most people know Texas is pro, oil and gas, but you and I were talking. There's very, very limited regulations or even processes Energy Transfer Partners, the parent company, had to go through for this pipeline, correct?
That's correct. There is, we've been amazed, most people in the state of Texas, there is no permit required to construct a pipeline in the state of Texas. So you're looking at, in this case, a segment of an intrastate pipeline that was sited and constructed with no public input. The company basically drew a line on a map and said the pipeline's going here.
And when people hear eminent domain, it's supposed to be taking people's land, but for the public good, whether it's federal infrastructure projects, this or that. But this pipeline, it's going from Texas. The oil is going into Mexico, presumably then being spun off to markets like Asia. Can you kind of talk about, from the beginning, what the rationale Energy Transfer Partners put forward for this being an eminent domain type pipeline, and where is this oil actually going to?
So first of all, this is natural gas, to be clear. It originates principally in the Permian Basin, sourced from hydraulic fracturing. The natural gas is processed in Texas at the Waha market hub, and then it's transported south through this pipeline into Mexico at the rate of 1.4 billion cubic feet a day. The issues here, first of all, Energy Transfer brought this project to the community and, in essence, tried to fly under the radar. So we found out about it mostly by accident through a number of sources. And they really weren't keen on telling the community at all about it. When it got exposed, there was a lot of community concern, and we started an active opposition to it about two and a half years ago. And so here we are today with the pipeline mostly in the ground. The theory here would be, right now, natural gas has a market price floor at about $3 per 1,000 cubic feet. It costs about twice that to produce it. So they're losing money on it. They're flaring it off. A variety of things are occurring. So the theory here would be export it south, liquefy it, send it to Asia, Oceania, where they can, in theory, get a higher price for it. This was most recently disclosed by Mr. Beauchamp, who is part of the Midland operation that has some fingers in this. So we've got a considerable amount of fact about what the use of the gas is and what the intent of the project is. But it's basically to export U.S. natural gas to a higher price market.
What's interesting to me is when I was covering Standing Rock, it was a little bit more subtle, the what I would call the con job, right? It goes from North Dakota to South Dakota, Iowa, and then to a hub in Illinois. And then Illinois distributes, but it's not going like directly from North Dakota into Canada. So this is very out in the open that it's going from the southernmost tip of the United States into Mexico. So my question is, obviously Texas government, the governor is pretty much rolls out the red carpet for oil and gas, but to seize people's land, have they given any rationale on why this is a public good for the state of Texas, for the United States? Because it just seems like this is to enrich Kelsey Warren and more oil executives.
The claim would be that the pipeline project itself produces about 800 jobs, which may in fact be true in aggregate, but none in the region. So no one benefited from a jobs perspective in this region. The claim would be that the drilling and extraction operations, production activities in the Permian Basin are good for America. the claim of energy security and energy independence somehow through the export of natural gas to Mexico and Asia. But that's really, as you suggested, a con job. In this case, the pipeline serves no domestic United States customer. It originates at the market hub in Waha. It goes south across the border, delivers no natural gas to anyone in the United States. So no benefit to anyone here in the region. I don't know what claim you could make that in the real truth that this is for the public good. Energy Transfer and its consortium partners are a for-profit private company. They're making the money off this, not the community. No one here in the region. So, there's no clear public good here at all.
And could you kind of paint a picture? Because when people hear eminent domain, it's kind of this towering phrase. Not everybody knows the details. So there were about 300 private landowners whose land had the pipeline going through, were going to be seized. Kind of talk about how did, like you said, this was kind of in the darkness of the night. How did the landowners find out that their land was going to be either seized or involved? And how many landowners now are in direct conflict with the company and the state?
The first notice the landowners got of this project was a letter in the mail that contained, among other documents, a landowner bill of rights that explained that their property was going to be subject to eminent domain condemnation. So that's the first they saw of it. The company made an offer to them. If they didn't accept the first offer, the company made a second offer. If they didn't accept the offer on the second round, their property was condemned, taken by force of the courts. In the state of Texas, there were 39 landowners on this project affected by the process, about 1/3 of the total route miles taken through condemnation. They go to an out-of-court administrative hearing. The special commissioners appointed by the judge decide on the amount of the damages payment to the landowner, and that's all they're allowed to talk about. At the point when the damages award is assessed, the property is taken before there's any real court process at all. If either party objects, they continue on to a civil court hearing. In this case, Energy Transfer objected. In all 39 cases, the average award to the landowners was 30 times what the company offered, and Energy Transfer thought that wasn't fair. So they proceeded on to take these landowners to court. So there are now 38 of 39 with pending civil court actions who haven't seen a dime of money despite the damage that occurred to their property in this process that'll be pending in court for about 2 years. So they basically had their property seized by force of the court by a private company exporting natural gas out of the United States.
What's interesting about that is, Governor Abbott, obviously, who preceded him, Governor Perry, who's up for nomination for the energy secretary. These are folks whose mantra is, don't tread on me. Big government is the enemy. I can't really think of bigger government than, getting a letter in the mail. The government's, seizing your property. How does that look? Do some of them immediately have to move? Is it kind of a situation where they're evicted, or they can stay? It's more the pipeline will be routed through there.
They stay. The pipeline's routed through there. Predominantly, this is ranch land, so these are operating productive ranches. The passage of the pipeline through their property during construction, for example, cut off their access to water for their cattle. It caused the loss of hunting leases on the ranch land. There's at least one landowner who suffered $1 million plus in damages as a consequence of this to their productive operation, and they're still out that money. Their homes are still there, but they have the pipeline crossing their property. They have the risk that it brings. They have the disruption to their ranching operation, and they have permanent damage to their landscape.
And I'm sure it's not a quiet thing building a pipeline next to their home.
No, it's not a quiet thing at all. The construction process is noisy, dirty, dusty. You're disturbing a 125-foot wide strip of land, trenching into mostly volcanic rock here. So it was pretty egregious.
And also, if there's spills, even without spills, I'm assuming having a pipeline there kind of devalues their property. with the risk of oil spills.
Yeah, would you want a 42-inch pipeline running through your backyard, basically operating at 1,440 psi? Probably not. The risk is significant. If the pipeline were to rupture, explode, and catch fire, you have to deal with that. You can see the territory that we're in, which is mostly short grass and scrub. Wildland fire here is our most significant risk. We've got no surface water in the region. We have to cover 28,000 square miles with an all-volunteer firefighting force. So we have no chance to deal with the consequences of something like that.
And obviously, because Standing Rock has put a spotlight on at this point, hundreds, if not thousands of pipelines being built around the country, it's also come forward that there's many pipeline leaks that go unreported. Energy Transfer, these companies say, oh, we don't want to over-report. that's their thing. Kind of talk about Texas, obviously, like the hub for oil and gas. How many pipeline leaks, big or small, do you typically see here?
There are dozens of leaks a day in the pipeline system here, and there are thousands and thousands of miles of pipeline in Texas, so it's a really common occurrence. All pipelines leak. It's a combination of material failure, human error, installation defect. So pipelines leak for a whole variety of reasons, and it's a daily thing.
And with President-elect Trump coming into office, one of his big policies was, taking back the jobs from Mexico and China and all these things, that populist tone. Obviously, this started before he came to power, but this is kind of, it's sending our resources to Mexico. And also, the Mexico aspect is interesting because Carlos Slim is involved. He's, a billionaire. He's actually the biggest shareholder in the New York Times. Interesting enough, he's monopolized industries in Mexico. Pretty much try to take advantage of poor people in terms of cable and a lot of those types of industries. What's their involvement in this? What's in it for them? And in terms of Energy Transfer Partners versus Mexico, do they own the largest part of this?
There is an equivalent entity in Mexico that's owned by the same consortium partners. So where the pipeline crosses the U.S.-Mexico border, the ownership of the pipeline changes hands to the Mexico side entity, but it's owned by the same people. So in Mexico, they're expanding the network of natural gas pipelines there. This project is one of 21 pipeline systems just for natural gas that is either in existence, under construction, or in the permitting and planning phases. They plan to send about 34 billion standard cubic feet of natural gas every single day south into Mexico, which is far more than Mexico could ever consume for all of its combined internal use, electrical generation, industrial feedstock. So again, it all goes down to liquefying it and sending it to a higher price market. And so Mexico wants a piece of that. Carlos Slim wants a piece of that. It's a pure profit game for them, their bankers and investors.
And we know the main pipeline up in North Dakota, the main issue has been the water. This pipeline, it's going under the ground. Is it also going through water sources? I know it's going through the Big Bend National Park, which is historic and has a lot of beautiful scenery, beautiful monuments. Where is this pipeline going through?
So the pipeline threads a needle. It actually does not cross through the national park, but it avoids cleverly all of the national park and state park land, and it threads a very specific corridor down to the southwest. It crosses over a couple of what are called minor aquifers in the state of Texas. This particular pipeline itself doesn't really pose any risk of groundwater contamination. It's natural gas, so a leak is not going to result in groundwater contamination like a crude system would. The principal issue here relative to water is water use. We know that the pipeline company, in the context of what you see here, has used probably 500 million gallons of water for construction purposes, ranging from drilling operations, dust control, hydrostatic testing, and so on. So that water has to come from somewhere. And so we're competing with the pipeline company for the use of that water that we need to live. And fundamentally, what's hard to appreciate unless you scan the horizon, we're in a desert. We get less than 11 inches of rainfall here on an annual basis. There are no lakes here. There are no rivers here. So all that water comes from slow recharge aquifers, and we're all competing for that same water source.
And we're seeing in other areas. I mean, Corpus Christi right now, there was a huge spill near Standing Rock. Spills going into creeks, rivers, the asphalt plant in Corpus Christi. So just describe that because it's not crude, because it's natural gas. If there's a leak, it's not so much that it would directly impact the water, but there would be a scarcity of water.
Scarcity comes from the construction operation itself. Our principal contamination-related issues, they'll use that we know of at least 1.6 million gallons of water to test the pipeline before it goes in operation. That water, by virtue of the testing operation, is contaminated. They've applied with the Railroad Commission of Texas for surface disposal permits for that water, which basically means they're going to dump contaminated water onto the ground. So 1.6 million gallons of contaminated water gets dumped out somewhere along this pipeline route. Ostensibly, that water filters through the ground. The ground cleans it up before it reaches the water table. At least that's the idea. And then none of it runs off into any other creek, river, ephemeral stream, or wetland. So that's what the Railroad Commission would have you believe. Reality is probably something different than that. So our issues are surface water contamination, water use, and things like this pipeline. And there are other activities, that are on our horizon. There's a fracking development north of us that will eventually produce and complete 4,000 wells with an average of 5.4 million gallons of water required to complete each of those wells. So do the math, and then ask the question: what happens to that contaminated water?